The most tragic true crime cases, in my opinion, are the ones that feel almost inevitable. When children are raised in broken homes and spend their teenage years walking down a dark path, it's no surprise when something goes terribly wrong. But it's all the more tragic, knowing the world barely gave them a chance. Both of the girls in today's video fit this mold. Because of their difficult pasts, it seems as though people don't care too much about finding them. However, their families deserve for their cases to be put to rest, and the girls themselves deserve justice. Pollyanne Jean Carter had a history of runaway attempts. There is very little information about her life before her disappearance online, but based on that single fact, I'm forced to assume her life wasn't exactly perfect. On October 29, 1984, Pollyanne was at a friend's house in the 6700 block of Matthias Road in Graham, Washington. She called her friend to tell them that she was headed home. I'm not sure if she called the friend from inside the house she was visiting, or even if the friend was the same person she was visiting. The phrasing in most databases is very confusing. Either way, this is the last time anyone would be confirmed to have heard from Pollyanne. She never arrived home and was never seen again. At least, police are fairly sure Pollyanne was never seen again. There are unconfirmed sightings of the 15-year-old in the Tacoma area shortly after her disappearance. However, all signs point to Pollyanne either having run away yet again, and this time not returning, or facing some terrible fate at the hands of true evil. After her disappearance, her sister confessed to police that she was fairly certain Pollyanne had been involved in prostitution for the past 1 or 2 years. That would mean that Pollyanne was barely a teenager when she got involved in the dangerous, emotionally and physically damaging world of illegal sex work. If the vulnerable girl had vanished into this particular criminal underworld, that heightens the chances that something terrible happened to her. I've come up with a few theories of my own, since hardly anyone online has shared their theories or even discussed Pollyanne's case. My first theory is that she is one of the Green River Killer's victims. We've discussed Gary Ridgway in past videos. He murdered sex workers and runaways, many of them underage girls, in the 80s and 90s in Washington state. Ridgway has been incredibly forthcoming about who his victims were, although he rarely knew their names. He has admitted to the murders of several as of yet unidentified women. Perhaps one of these is Pollyanne. Specifically, I looked into the discoveries of Jane Doe B20. She was so badly deteriorated that police couldn't gather much identifying information from her corpse other than the fact that she was a woman who had probably been murdered in the 70s. Given that this is the decade before Pollyanne's disappearance, this probably isn't the teenager. There are many Washington serial killers other than the Green River Killer, but I did find a few that might be responsible for Pollyanne's disappearance. The first is Martin Lee Sanders, although he was only in Seattle sporadically in the early 80s, and police don't believe he killed anyone in Washington state during this time. Another rather weak theory is Gary Shaw. He murdered 2 women on separate occasions, both times because the women refused to have sex with him. These murders seemed to be triggered by a situational rage, however. Neither of the women were sex workers, but rather regular people Gary met in bars and then tried to take home. The strongest contender is Robert Lee Yates, who killed sex workers in the time frame of Pollyanne's disappearance. However, he did function more in the area of Spokane, Washington, But perhaps Pollyanne started living a transient lifestyle after her disappearance and unfortunately found herself in Yates' stomping grounds. At the end of the day, no solid leads have come forward regarding Pollyanne's case, and her disappearance remains a total mystery to this day. The theories I presented in this video are merely my own, created through research that could hardly be called extensive. Pollyanne stood at 5 feet 5 inches at the time of her disappearance and weighed 115 pounds. She was Caucasian and had sandy brown hair and blue eyes. Her dentals and DNA are available for testing. She is classified as endangered missing. Please, if you have any information on Pollyanne or what might have happened to her, contact the numbers in the description below. Kayla Mae Croft Payne was an extremely troubled child. By the time she was 18, she was homeless, unemployed, and addicted to drugs, living a transient lifestyle. She had also given birth to a baby girl, but lost custody of the child due to her drug use. Her father, Thomas Payne, and mother, a transient woman uninvolved in her daughter's life, were separated, with her mother's last address being listed in Vader, Washington. On May 5, 2010, Cassandra Sines, a friend of Kayla's, went to the police to report Kayla missing. She hadn't heard from Kayla since April 20th and was increasingly worried about her friend's safety. When police began investigating, they found that Kayla hadn't posted anything on her MySpace page since April 28th. This might not seem particularly troubling at first, but Kayla was incredibly active on social media, specifically MySpace and Facebook. While it seems as though both her social media pages have since been taken down, all databases claim that the stretch of silence is incredibly unusual for the teenager. Another troubling moment came when Kayla failed to show up for a scheduled court hearing in regards to her daughter. Thomas Payne claims that his daughter would never have missed a court hearing for her child, and yet Kayla was nowhere to be found. Cassandra was especially worried for her friend because Kayla was associating with a man with whom she had once been involved, I believe romantically. I'm unsure whether or not this man was the father of her child, but either way, the man was violent and had threatened Kayla's life in the past. Cassandra worried that this man had done something to Kayla. In 2015, however, 5 years after the teen's disappearance, foul play would be all but ruled out. This is because someone came forward who claimed to have witnessed Kayla's death. Very few details have come out about the witness or what about them makes the police believe their story, but articles claim that the police have corroborated their account with several other people and believe the story. This unnamed witness claimed that Kayla had died very shortly after her disappearance due to an accidental drug overdose. Apparently, she had been doing drugs in an RV park in northern Cowlitz County, and when the people with her realized she was dead, they panicked and buried her in a thick patch of northwest Oregon woods. They hadn't wanted to get police involved because not only were they doing illegal drugs, but they also didn't want to be blamed for Kayla's death. I don't know why the witness chose to come forward 5 years after the incident, but I'm glad they did and that other people corroborated their story. However, Kayla's remains still haven't been found. The police began excavating the plot of land in which the witness claimed Kayla was buried, but they still didn't find anything. The supposed location of Kayla's body remains a secret because the land is privately owned, and the police have stayed relatively quiet to protect the identity of the homeowner, but they did tell several local news sources that they used everything from cadaver dogs to excavating equipment in the search for Kayla's body. Still, no trace of her has been found. I have to wonder if perhaps the witness got the location of her body wrong. If she and the other young adults were all doing drugs, it stands to reason that the witnesses wouldn't have been in the right headspace while they were burying her. I doubt that anyone could remember the specific location where they buried a body if they had left the location unmarked, had been in an incredibly panicked state, and were frequent drug abusers. However, this is just my conjecture. Although police are convinced Kayla is dead, her remains still haven't been found, and that means her family only has partial closure on this years-old cold case. Thomas Payne and Kayla's aunt, Christy Hoover, held a candlelight vigil for the girl in 2014 in a Chehalis playground, but other than that, her family has been relatively quiet on the topic of her disappearance. When Kayla vanished, she stood between 5 feet 6 inches and 5 feet 9 inches. She weighed roughly 131 pounds. She was Caucasian and had brown hair and blue eyes. Her ears and the left side of her lower lip were pierced. She was wearing a red and gray Washington State University sweatshirt and blue and yellow Centralia College sweatpants. Although I'm not sure how police have that final description of her, if it's unclear when or where exactly she died. Perhaps the witness who helped bury her remembered her outfit, but this seems unlikely. Either way, that's the description that databases have for Kayla. If you have any information on the whereabouts of Kayla or her remains, please contact the numbers in the description below. Please help bring these missing children